Welcome back to the Splash Live, Greater West Bloomfield's live daily news and talk show. I'm Tyler Keefe alongside Diane Shaban and our whole team here at Civic Center TV. One of our favorite things to look at all throughout our community is the extensive history we have in all four communities here in Greater West Bloomfield and branching out even further into other parts of Oakland County. A great place to do that is at the Sylvan Lake Community Center for one of their periodic Sylvan Story events hosted by Sylvan Lake historian Helen Jane Peters. A really cool one coming up on Thursday night. We'll even have our team out there to get a report on that for an upcoming edition of the Splash Live. And joining us now is one of the panelists that will be talking about a big story that was making news in our local area back in 1971 as bus integration became a hot point issue in Oakland County and the Sylvan Lake and certainly in the Pontiac area especially. Joining us now is Deborah Glazer on the Splash Live. Deborah, thanks for joining us today to talk about what's going to be going on tomorrow night at the Sylvan Lake Community Center. A really interesting story to be talking about with panelists from throughout our community who are experts on what happened back in 1971.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to have you on because this is a really interesting story. Yeah, it's a really interesting story that you're going to be getting into with Helen Jane and with the panel. So just give us some background on just how hot of an issue bus integration really was in our local area back in 1971.
Well, so what makes this super interesting is that this was the first time that mandated busing was implemented in the North. So most people are familiar with Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. When you mention Ruby Bridges, people know that. But what people have not heard about is the group, which is a group of 12-year-old kids, seventh graders at Jefferson Junior High, who, during forced busing, formed a student-led club to rally in favor of promoting racial understanding and unity in one of the most violent desegregation events during that era. So I was born at Pontiac General. I grew up in my formative years in Pontiac. I was not a part of the group, but my older brother was. And so this event really shaped my childhood in many ways. I was on the periphery, but I remember it very well. And the kids, it was such a hot button at that time that when the media got hold of it, the kids were sent on press junkets. They were sent to Washington to testify. And I remember all of that. And my brother was in Time magazine. And so growing up, I think in every library, I always went into the stacks to find his article. And I was always fascinated with it. So I've been producing for many, many years and really shifted into filmmaking, particularly documentary filmmaking. And this is a story I've wanted to tell. I think people need to know about it. It's unique because it's a neat story told through the eyes of adolescents. So there are many, many stories during the civil rights era. Technically that ended in 1968. So even though civil rights, I think, we're still at that point where we're fighting for civil rights, right? For equality. But in 1970, when the mandate was originally issued by the Honorary Damon Keith, it wasn't implemented until 1971, the school year of 1971. I lost my train of thought for a second there. There's so much in this topic.
There really is. There's a lot to unpack here, Deborah, and that's why they're having this Sylvan Story special presentation of this tomorrow night. It's happening Thursday night, 7 o'clock at the Sylvan Lake Community Center. It is free. It is open to the public. People attending are encouraged to attend to talk about this before and after and get their questions answered because, like you said, what's so interesting about this story isn't how it played into the immediate post-civil rights, technically, era in our local area, but the fact that, while the adults were screaming at each other, it was these kids who were coming together to solve this super complex issue that had been affecting our country and even affecting in this case, specifically our local area for so long. And so tell us about the panel, the people that are going to be speaking about this with you and with Helen Jane, and the stories they have to tell about this era in our history.
Well, you have to remember, like, this is the core level of humanity, the lowest level, right? These 12-year-old kids who knew better than to perpetuate hate. So tomorrow's panel will be, we're not experts on busing. I'm not an expert on busing. But first, let me explain what these kids did that makes it so unique. They shut off the adults. They're like, hey, we're the ones who are going to school. We're the ones who need to make it work. And that became their motto. We can make it work. And they were kind of known, they called it the Jefferson Club, but it was really the group. We can make it work. So the kids, there will be, I call them the kids, even though we're not kids. They'll be talking about what they did. And what's so cool about it is that they created a show and they danced to the songs of the Jackson 5. They created skits about racial understanding, and they toured the state of Michigan. And thousands of kids signed a pledge for their 6 rules that they created for how to get along. And so their stories are fascinating. I mean, and everybody has one. If I were to put it out there, I would get, hundreds of people just saying, oh yeah, I remember I did that. Oh, I remember this. I remember that. So tomorrow night, that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk a little bit about the setup of, how they got where they are and how it affected them. Because really, it's been said that busing was a failure. And if you talk to them, they'll say, you know what? They have no idea what they did for us. They thought they were taking something away, and really they gave them the world.
And we've seen the progress that has come from events like this, things that had happened in our history, in our local area that parallel what happened in other areas of the U.S. and other areas of the world, the impact that has. And also, finally, Deborah, before we let you go today, I just want to talk about, it's important to have a conversation on a story like this because in so many ways, it does parallel a lot of what has been going on in our recent times, certainly over the last few years, but continues to be part of the vernacular discussion in our community on these issues today. And being able to parallel that and localize that is really important, not just for communities like Sylvan Lake and for Pontiac, but really for communities all across the country.
Yes, absolutely. I wish I could say that a lot has changed. There's a saying that says, so much has changed that nothing has changed. I feel like we're going backwards. But stories like this are what bring a community together. And when you have a history, understanding it helps us not rewrite that same script, right? Let's write a new one. And in this, I think there's a nugget of inspiration for kids today. This might sound trite that children are our future, but they really are. And maybe there's something in here from the 12-year-old kids that they were that would inspire a new generation to make a change, to be better. I can't believe that we're still talking about equality. I mean, that should have been a non-issue from the beginning. So, yeah.
Yeah, like you said, a lot, so much has changed that nothing has changed. It's only been a little over 50 years since this had 52. Been going down, since these events of 1970. Yeah, 52 years. It's only been 52 years. And if you put it in that context, you think about now, that's not that long of a time historically speaking. That's not that long of a time speaking in terms of our day-to-day lives. And so really important to have these sort of stories out in our community to localize this. And that's exactly what Deborah and the team of panelists with Helen Jane Peters will be doing at the Sylvan Lake Community Center. Again, that is 7 o'clock for the presentation. Doors open around 6:30 for refreshments, a little pre-discussion. There'll be some time to ask some questions after the presentation and mix and mingle as well. And it will include Cheryl Toby, who is one of the leaders of that group back in 1971, currently living in Sylvan Lake. Deborah, thank you so much for giving us a look into this event, and we're looking forward to seeing you tomorrow night at the Sylvan Lake Community Center.
Thank you. I just want to say one other thing too. If anyone is interested in sponsoring the documentary, you can reach me, contact me at windwardfilms.com, windward, WINDWARD films.com. Send me a note. We are hoping for sponsorship. I think this is a wonderful message that the world needs to hear.
It's a great story to tell. We appreciate you helping to tell this story, and of course would encourage people, if they have the means to do so, they want to support getting this story out there and contextualizing it even into today. A great way to do that is by supporting Deborah's film. We'll see you tomorrow night at the Sylvan Lake Community Center.